Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody. Thank you for tuning into another Supatease video. And in this one, we're going to be doing a breakdown, a meta-analysis of WoW PvP, which specializations are dominating, which ones are starting to fall behind or have just been totally forgotten, or is the game actually really balanced, even despite no significant class changes for about 3 weeks, if longer than that. So I think this is going to be really exciting to see what's going down as far as the breakdown for specializations. We're going to be looking at their popularity. We're going to be looking at their win rates to see which ones are really coming out on top. So the first breakdown is going to be for melee DPS. We can see Ret Paladins taking a huge skyrocket. They were maintaining in a top position, but they are definitely really dominating in PvP across the board. I think you're going to notice that in BG Blitz as well. So debatably, I think Ret Paladin, if you're especially a beginner player, is probably the best specialization to go after right now. We can look at their win rates as well. Ret Paladin holding strong over a 50% win rate, which is really healthy. This recently went up. Its popularity is 15%, and in Battleground Blitz, its win rate is also above 50% with a 15% popularity rate. It's just really well rounded, has really good 1v1 potential, really good burst damage. You can see it represented on the graph towards the top end, and it's honestly a specialization that I feel like not a lot of people talked about leading up to this. We didn't see a lot of it in competitive tournament play, but on ladder, it's absolutely a force to be reckoned with. Tailing right behind that is still Fury Warrior in the second place position at 15% popularity rate, and its win rate is above 50% as well. So a really healthy pick, really easy specialization to pick up as well and do well on. When we look at Battleground Blitz, I think Fury Warrior is actually second place as well. So a really good pick regardless of what content you want to do. And it's holding steady with a huge increase in win rate from 45 to 52%. So Fury Warrior is definitely starting to have a come up, even though we haven't seen any buffs, right, to Warrior. I feel like Warrior was kind of like considered one of the weaker classes leading up to the most recent round of class changes, but now it's really starting to dominate through win rate and popularity. And then we fall to the third most popular spec, which is Arms Warrior, which a lot of people consider to be, I would say, the weakest melee or very close to the weakest melee DPS at the moment in the meta. But even Arms Warrior, when we scroll down and can find its win rate here, it's hovering just a little bit above 50%, 2% behind that of Fury or Ret Paladin, but actually still really close as far as runnings for class balance. So while Arms Warrior does have, significant weaknesses and trade-offs, I think especially against, mages, Ellies, and hunters, it seems like it's still a really good pick, even despite that. And even in BG Blitz, we see it as the fourth represented on popularity, and when we look at its win rate, it starts to fall down quite a lot more, but when you're below 50%, it's a bit of a riskier pick. So Arms Warrior definitely, even though its popularity is high, I think just the fantasy of Warrior is kind of carrying its popularity more than its viability. But when it is viable and it's popular, it takes like 30% of the popular vote in a lot of these breakdowns. But it's doing better in Arena this week, falling a little bit short of Fury Warrior, I think, in Battleground Blitz, but still a decent option. And considering that this is supposed to be the weakest melee, that still looks really good number-wise. The next one is Windwalker Monk, which is actually coming into fourth place in terms of popularity, climbing above Demon Hunter. Demon Hunter seems to be on a little bit of a downward trend recently. Win rate going slightly down, but still holding at 50%, which is definitely solid. That's the goal, right? They want every class to be at 50% win rate if they want the game to be, perfectly balanced. Would be every class is 50% win rate. BG Blitz, it's skyrocketed win rate from 43 to 52%. I don't know if people just learned how to play Windwalker Monk in BGs or what's going on with that, but it is significantly less popular at only 5.18%. But this win rate's really good. Anything above a 50%, anything, really above a 50% win rate, it means that spec is really healthy. It's doing really well in that content. Next one, Demon Hunter. It's falling off, right? It's falling into like the fifth place position, but it's still, let's see what its win rate is as we scroll down here. It's still holding above a 50% win rate in solo shuffle, although its popularity is starting to go down. So maybe Demon Hunter is still kind of slightly on the weaker side, given that its popularity is going down, but its win rate is still holding solid, even despite that drop off. And when we look at Battleground Blitz, I think it's going to be way higher, right? So Demon Hunter really good in Battleground Blitz if you want to be going into that. Seems like it's really strong and competitive. We see that big spike up here, even despite class changes, right? You can see these graphs fluctuating so much, even with no class changes at all, which is really good because that means it's piquing people's curiosities. They're making alts, they're likely trying things and realizing, hey, this is actually not that bad, and it's actually working out really well. So Demon Hunter seems like it's a little bit of a better choice for Battleground Blitz than for Arena, but definitely still good overall. We see the next one, Enhancement Shaman, taking a bit of a spike. It's kind of hidden underneath all these other lines, but Enhancement Shaman is on the come up. Its win rate is still solidly above 50%, but its pick rate is really low, only at 3.45%. So it went up to 7%. It doubled. My mistake here. It's doubled up to 7% from 3.5. So Enhance is definitely doing a lot better, even though win rate is down. Let's see how it's holding in Battleground Blitz. And I think Enhance would have been considered one of the weaker melee DPS options. It's still holding solid as well in BG Blitz at above a 50% win rate, 52% win rate. I think it's still got a lot of options. It's got cool abilities as well as Static Field Totem and Battleground Blitz to pull enemies around. Nice just burst damage. It's got simple builds. It's got complex builds, so it could be good for either player if you want to advance from a beginner to a more advanced level play. So Enhance is actually holding pretty solid here in the central portion of this graph. And Feral Druid, which was the most dominant melee DPS, I think, for a really long time. In tournament meta, we considered Feral and Rogue like the only melee you can play. And when you look at the graph, Feral and Rogue are actually at the bottom. So Feral right here, as we look at the win rate to try and figure out what's going on with it, it's still at 53%, which is really high. This is a good win rate above 50%, and it's still at about 6.5% popularity rate. I think it's most likely just because Feral Druid is harder to play. So a Fury Warrior or Rep Paladin can get you similar results, even if it's within 5% of the results of a Feral Druid. The amount of complexity that you need to actually learn to play Feral Druid is going to be a barrier for a large majority of players. Some people like that, they want to go after that, but other people just go for the path of least resistance, as we've seen. But it looks like it's still really healthy, really strong specialization. And when we look at Battleground Blitz for Feral Druid, and we look at its win rate, it's actually below 50%. I can't believe Feral Druid is at 43%, because when I see Feral Druids in my BG Blitz is above 3K, like, these guys are really dominant. It's gone up to 49%. I don't know what's going on with this win rate, why it was so low to begin with. Maybe people are figuring out how to play it, but this is really surprising because I think Feral Druid is actually, this is where my opinion is kind of interjecting more than what the data says. And Feral Druid is really good in BG Blitz. So to see its popularity or its win rate be this low is actually surprising. But it's definitely healthy in Arena. And I think we'll have to wait and see how it plays because people have been actually changing off of it in BG Blitz. It's down, popularity is down 5%, even though its win rate, maybe all the bad ferals left and now its win rate is going to start to recover. Maybe people re-roll or something, just gave it a really negative win rate, something like that. But it's definitely decent overall. Then we move forward onto the Death Knights, which Unholy Death Knight got some attention in the last build, which is now some time ago. But its win rate is coming in still above 50%, 51.3%, but its popularity is halved. It's gone down from 11 to 5%. So obviously it's not strong enough to keep the Fodom re-rollers, I think. So this is likely why they're kind of like topping out and getting off the class and likely going onto a Rep Paladin or a Fury Warrior or something like that. But I don't think it's completely unviable. I think it's definitely got some nice burst with Apocalypse. I've been playing Death Knight a little bit more and trying to do the 2400 challenge on it, although I've been more focused on trying to get rank 1 on Boomkin in the past couple of days, but I did make a Death Knight. It didn't feel as bursty or chunky as Enhance or Ret, or have the same type of pressure as Fury Warrior, though, I will say. But in Battleground Blitz, this is where Death Knight, I think, we're going to see. I'm surprised that its popularity is so low because I think Death Knight has huge control in the outcome of a Battleground Blitz with Death Grip and Chains of Ice, and its win rate is at 53%. Its popularity, though, has cut in half from 9% to 4.4%, which is really surprising because I would have expected Battleground Blitz Death Knight to be, maybe people are going Frost, but it doesn't even look like that. Frost is holding steady and it's still got a higher win rate. So maybe people are actually preferring Frost because its burst damage is higher, more AoE crowd control. Could definitely see that being the deciding factor. I actually kind of think Frost might be better than Unholy, which is why we're seeing these numbers like that. So Unholy is still kind of holding a little bit of a lower position. Frost Death Knight following just underneath Unholy. Frost just tends to be less popular than Unholy, even when Unholy is worse. But its win rate, this is one of the highest, I think this is the highest win rate we've seen so far, 55.39%. That's a really good win rate, really solid win rate at this point in the season. Even though its popularity is not as high as other specializations, it's still a really good pick there. And we just looked at it in BG Blitz, so Frost DK is definitely a good one to go after. And then Rogue is going to always be the lowest in popularity just because it's it's a lot more complicated. It's harder to play, and the majority of players are not looking for overly complex play. Although I think it's good to have it as an option, because then you've got, you know, a wide variety on your menu when they go in the restaurant, and you got somebody who doesn't want the simple burger, they want a little bit more. It's good to have it, but its popularity is almost always just going to be low as a result. But Outlaw Rogue, which I would consider the best spec in the game at the moment, and that's mostly because it's holding the highest win rate. This is 55. Actually, it's less than Frosty K, but 55% win rate. Even though it's the lowest popularity, I think it's the strongest spec in the game. You have the most amount of control for games, and you have really solid damage output. In Shuffle, it's just that it's harder to play. It's harder to get those results from a personal skill level than that of a Rep Paladin or a Fury Warrior. But if you can get to that point, I think it's going to give you way more. But we do see Rogue popularity jump up a lot more in BG Blitz with Assassination at least at the top. But Outlaw is the bottom Rogue spec, but its win rate is just jumped up to 54%, even though its popularity has fallen. I think it can be a really good flag carry spec with the grappling hook builds, and you can get across the map really fast. Burst damage is a little bit lacking. I think that's why it's probably less popular than Assassination or Subtlety, so you can't just like 100-0 a Monk FC immediately. It's a bit more passive than that. It's probably a better spec or a decent spec in team fights than that of like a Subtlety Rogue, but for split objectives, I could see that's why its popularity is a little bit lower, but it's still holding a really good and healthy win rate in BG Blitz. Still a really good pick as long as you want to go that more complex route. Survival Hunter at 3.46% popularity. Survival seems to be kind of getting hit hard here, not doing too well. It's falling below a 50% win rate. Popularity actually doubled, so maybe that's why the win rate went down. More people are picking it up, and they don't know what they're doing, so they're losing on it or something. But anything that's below a 50% win rate is probably going to be a bit of a more of a rough ride as far as specializations. And when we look at BG Blitz, Survival Hunter is probably going to be a very similar position is what I'm expecting. It's in a much worse position than that. Oh my god, a 38% win rate. Its pick rate has dropped down to 0.71%. So Survival Hunter looks like it's in trouble. Survival Hunter is in danger right now, whether it's Arena or BG Blitz. These numbers are rough. These are rough. I was not expecting Survival Hunter to be in that position. Out of all the specs that everybody is talking about all the time as far as being not strong or not balanced, I was not expecting Survival Hunter to be in that rough of a position. We have Subtlety Rogue, which again has got that niche gameplay. Curious to see what its win rate is. Its pick rate is always going to be low. So it's around 3%, still holding at a 54% win rate. So still really decent option. Just again, if you don't know how to play Subtlety Rogue, you're not going to have fun. You have to play it the exact way, and everyone plays it exactly the same way. If you don't know that way of that art, then you're not going to have a good time. And then in Battleground Blitz, it's kind of middle of the pack. But that's obviously one of the best specs in the game, I think, for Battleground Blitz. But its win rate has fallen off a lot. So maybe some people re-rolled for Fodem because they saw how good it was. They did realize they didn't know how to play it. Now its win rate has dropped 13%. It was over a 60% win rate, which is crazy. That is wild to have over a 60% win rate over this long of a period of time, from December to January. That's such a long period of time. To be able to hold such a high win rate. So it's fallen off a bit, but it's still, if you want to play it and you can understand it, I think it's a really good pick still. But if you're kind of first time to it and you're, more averse to trying to learn something that's complicated, then maybe avoid it. Assassination Rogue, which rides through the middle, and somehow I missed it because it looks like it cuts off a little bit early here on January 1st. It looks like Assassination Rogue is still really good, really solid win rate at 55%. Popularity still really healthy, also at 7%. I think anything from like 7 to 10 is probably a really healthy margin. So Assassination Rogue looks like a really good pick right now, at least in Shuffle. And I think the same as in Blitz. Its popularity is actually almost getting up there with Fury Warriors and Rep Paladins. Win rates above 50%. Assassination Rogue looks like it's doing really solid. It's in a really good position. Now when we look at the range DPS, Beast Mastery Hunter is still easily holding out at the top. I think it's still the best range DPS in the game. But its win rate is not staggeringly high, even despite this high pick rate. 51% win rate with a 22% popularity rate, but it's still just really good, really easy rating, even in its current iteration. Frost Mage still holds at the second position, even with no changes. Win rate hovering now, it finally got above 50% win rate to a 52% win rate. I think it was probably struggling when everyone was re-rolling Ellie's. Maybe the Ellie's, actually Ellie popularity is actually up a little bit, but Frost is still really good, really solid, lots of instant cast damage, really tanky. I think it's in a really good position. When we look at Affliction Warlock, the next one here, above 50% win rate, Its popularity has gone up. Affliction is a really good option, really fun, really competitive, nice one to jump in here. The ranged are really healthy, I think, overall. Shadow Priest, really strong. Win rates holding out at 50%. Popularity went up. Likely win rate's a little bit lower just because I think it's strong because it's tanky. But if any of your teammates make a mistake, then you don't really have a lot of, you have some control, life swap and things like that. I think if you play Siphon, you can have a lot of control on the outcome of the game. It's a little bit more complicated than a lot of the other casters, but I think its durability really carries it in PvP at the moment. Ellie Shaman is still holding on in the middle here. Really, I think is really, at least most of the range are in a really healthy spot. It's still above 50% win rate. Popularity went up a little bit this week to 10%. Just really solid overall damage, although sometimes randomness determines whether you get a kill or not. If you're getting an Ascendance proc or Earthshocks crit, stars align, you can get cheese a win for no reason. For me, it's kind of like the Rep Paladin of ranged in that sense. You just get some big crits and it's just over, you get a win. So if you like that and you're not looking for something that's like super complicated, a lot of instant casts, I think it's a really good pick. We look at Destruction Warlock, which is actually competing now with Boomkin on popularity, but its win rate fell a little bit, 4% down to 51%, and its popularity is falling. So this is kind of telling me that people they tried Destro. They saw there was like a big spike up here. They tried it, but maybe it's not working out the best for them. So it's starting to fall off a little bit more for them. But it's still, I think, a decent spec. But yeah, it's got weaknesses against melee. I think does really good into ranged. And then Boomkin win rates have gone up for it. Popularity is definitely a bit higher this time around as well, going up about 1.6%, now to 53% win rate as well for Boomkin. So actually a really high win rate, even though I get frustrated and pull what's left of my hair out of my skull whenever I'm playing it in shuffle. But it's definitely in a really good position according to all the data and the analytics. When we look at Marksmanship Hunter, which I thought was weak, honestly, it's still holding above a 50% win rate, but its popularity is trending down a little bit. So it's probably not as strong, but it's still really good. When we look at the next one here, we got, what is that, Devastation Evoker, which I recommended as like a beginner range to like anybody. I think it's really good. Win rate still solidly above 50%. Popularity is going down a little bit. Had a bit of a swing. People are probably like making alts and trying different things, and that's what we see as a swing graph. But I think Devastation is actually still really solid, even despite the representation here. Demonology is another one that I'm surprised to see so low on popularity, because I think it's really good. Look at this thing. Its win rate spiked up to 56%. I think Demonology is like a super sleeper specialization, given its popularity, and even with no changes coming in, I think it's super sleeper. Actually, I might try Demonology myself. Actually, I've only tried Destro and Affliction so far this season, but Demonology looks really good. So I think that's likely why it's leading in like that. Next one we got is a Fire Mage, which I think everybody agrees is weak, but its win rate actually went up to 53%, which is higher than Frost, but its popularity is less than 2%. So it actually has a higher win rate than the second most popular spec, but it's got the same thing with Boomkin. So it's like there's one dude making Fire Mage work is what this tells me. And while everybody else has abandoned it, they've managed to make it work. They're kind of like what is the guy in Super Smash Brothers that plays Kirby or plays Jigglypuff when everybody else plays like Fox or Falco or something. That's what they're doing with this, because Fire Mage, I think most people would agree it's not the strongest, but there's one guy making it work and doing it really, really well on it. And then finally, I think we got Augmentation Evoker, which is just it's just a cheese spec. It's 33% win rate. It's just a tank spec now. Doesn't do any damage. Makes your team a little bit more durable. Kind of just feels like they just want people to forget that it exists for PvP. So I would not recommend it. It's a really cheesy spec. Yeah, it's got a really cheesy one-shot still, I think, but its win rate it's in free fall. AUG is not holding on strong. And then when we look at Battleground Blitz and break it down in Blitz, we can see there's a little bit of a trade-off, but BM Hunter is still at the top. Devastation Evoker had a really solid win rate at 66%, but that's fallen 15%. That's with more time, right? So somebody might have had a lucky streak. Shadow's on the uptick. We got all above 50% win rates for all the specs. Beastmaster actually has the lowest win rate, below 50%. Probably because its popularity jumped up, so a bunch of people re-rolled to it. They realized they're not good enough to actually just play it that well, and they lost a bunch of games, so maybe the win rate got dragged down by them. AUG is just dead, dude. AUG is dead. Yeah, it's over, dude. Fire Mage had a 70% win rate at one point. It's dropped down to 56%, which is still surprisingly high, and I think in BG Blitz it's mostly just because Ringer Frost and Ice Wall are really good mechanics, and then Combustion One-Shot on a Flag Carrier can still be really good. So Fire Mage is probably better in BG Blitz than it is anywhere else just because of that. Ellie Shaman's still really good, a really good pick across Arena or BG Blitz. Arcane also going up to a 68% win rate, even though its pick rate is only 3% in BG Blitz. I think it's a really strong assassin at the moment. It does huge burst damage with Arcane Surge Evocation stacked up, so it's looking really good in BG Blitz. This guy looks bugged out, so we're going to ignore the Demon Hunter graph here because I think he's meant to be in the melee section. Destruction Warlock, its win rate has fallen off as well, so everyone re-rolled to it. Almost 70% win rate at one point has fallen down to 53%. That's what we saw with that trending popularity. It's still okay, but not as strong as I think people were anticipating with the changes that came in a few weeks ago. Marksmanship Hunter also trending down in popularity. Its win rate's actually below 50%, so which surprised me because I thought Marks was better in BG Blitz, but obviously not, with it falling off like this. And Boomy's win rate in BG Blitz, which I'm really surprised because I would have expected these stats in Shuffle and not BG Blitz from my own experience. But win rate for Boomy in BG Blitz is 47% because I actually think Boomy is actually really good in BG Blitz, and the popularity is 17%, right? And Boomy's typically not a super popular spec. So if it's this popular, like you're really expecting it to be strong, but it's actually below a 50% win rate in BG Blitz. So these are kind of reversed for me. I was expecting Shuffle to be the other way around. I think it's still a really good pick, even despite these. Again, my opinion's interjecting over top of what the data is saying for this, because I think Boomkin is a lot better than that. Although maybe it's me that dragged this down because I think I lost like 4 BGs yesterday in a row or something. So this graph maybe is literally just me. Is there that few people playing the game at this point that I can do that single-handedly by myself? For healers in solo shuffle, Disc Priest, not surprising. It's just really fun and it's really strong. And honestly, they need to find a way to get people to want to play healer, right? So, nerfing Disc when it's this popular and this fun and this successful seems like a bad idea because it's obvious that people just like this playstyle. And if you did that, then you're just going to lose a whole bunch of healers in the pool. But you don't want it being so strong that no one can play the other healers. So it's about making the other healers as fun as Disc so everyone wants to play healer. I think that's the main goal that needs to shift around. And what's funny, even given its popularity, is it's below a 50% win rate, which is typically not a great spot for a specialization. Preservation Evoker is actually above it at 51% win rate. Holy Paladin 51%, Mistweaver 51%. These are literally almost all exactly the same. 51% for Holy Priest, 52% for Resto Druid, and Resto Shaman has the highest win rate, which I would have considered the weakest healer or close to the weakest healer at the moment, and it has the highest win rate. So are the healers actually more balanced than we are letting on right now? Because I think healer balance is the one that is more in debate. And this is interesting with the Ian Azakostas interview that they did with Mythic Plus, where their data is telling them that the game is balanced, but the perception of the game, people are just only playing certain things. So is this healer graph a perception thing? Or are the healers actually more equally matched with each other? We saw a big spike for Resto Shaman when they buffed them, dude, to 17% popularity, but that's fallen 6% since then. Same thing with Resto Druid, but hasn't lost all of its gains from those buffs. And you can see like those healers probably switched back into Disc, or maybe they re-rolled and then realized it's not that easy, and then they dragged the win rate down, but the win rate was already lower than 50%. And I mean, maybe it's just because there's so many Disc Priests. These are probably like, DPS mains that re-rolled that only have a couple, hours to play in the evening. They want an instant queue and they're not as good. So maybe they're dragging the win rate down is what I'm trying to think with this. But like this, when you look at a chart like this, you're thinking like, wow, the healer's actually really well balanced. And when I've played healer, some healers have bad matchups. You might get DPS that counter you or a healer that counters you. But I think it's a lot better than people are letting on. I think a lot of people say like the game is imbalanced and that's why the game isn't popular, but I don't think imbalance in PvP is actually the major issue at the moment. When we look at BG Blitz, Disc Priest win rate falls even more, down to 47% this week. Not a good week for Disc Priest. Resto Druid fell from 62 to 46%. That looks like win trading, bro. Like what? How does it drop 16%? That literally looks like the Resto Druids were win trading or something. That's actually insane. And then Holy Paladin went up 15% from 45 to 60%. Okay, so some Holy Paladins had a really good run here because I would have thought Holy Paladin's a lot weaker in BG Blitz. But when you look at that, it looks like the strongest healer. For Holy Priest, 50 to 52%. Prez, 52%, totally fine. Resto Shaman, 50%. Mistweaver, which you expect to be the highest. It's in a solid position, right? At 52%, at 32% popularity rate. So honestly, like, looking at this breakdown, there was no class changes. There has been no class changes for like weeks. And it's like there are some specs that are just absolutely dead, like AUG. Survival Hunter looks like it's struggling a bit. Fire Mage could be struggling, but has some areas where it's still obviously doing really well. It makes me realize that when I'm playing the game and I'm having fun, it's like the game is actually fun. So like, I think it's just MMR, reward structure, that needs to be, facelifted. So expectations are, in a good spot for players who are playing. They don't have false expectations of the rank that they're supposed to be playing at, because as far as balance, like, this is one of the most balanced states the game has been in probably of all time when we're looking at this data and breaking it down, which would make you think that the game should be the most popular it's ever been, but it's not. So it's a little bit unfortunate in that sense, but definitely is worth playing. If you're somebody watching this video and you wanted to know whether or not, should I come back? Is it worth playing? From a balance and a gameplay standpoint, I think it is. I think it absolutely is. Like, looking at this chart, unless you want to be an AUG, just don't be an AUG, and then it's great. So I hope you guys enjoyed this breakdown. Thank you guys very much for tuning in and supporting the channel, and I will continue to bring great content that is hopefully going to be helping you out into the future. So thank you, and I will see you in the next one.